Why are cancer rates going up for the last 38 years in teenagers?
Cancer incidence for a variety of cancers is significantly elevated in Allegheny County compared to national averages.
Cancer in children is relatively rare, but it does remain the leading cause of death by disease past infancy among children in the United States.
And why is it that in the current epidemic of breast cancer, more than 80% of women have no family history of the disease? Could these be related to the ocean of chemicals in which we now live?
And we see the trends, and we see what folks are exposed to. Then you add race and the history of race in this country, and it's that much worse.
The goals of this meeting are not just to share good science and go home and say we learned something, but to say what do we do with this information and how do we move it forward.
I went in with a number of assumptions that I think are commonly held by most people in cancer research and probably most people who are part of the public. And the assumption number one is that chemicals would be tested before they are released to the public. But what we learned was that since World War II, there are somewhere around 80,000 chemicals that have been put on the market, only a fraction of which have actually been tested for their carcinogenic event. The second assumption was that carcinogens would be regulated. And that turned out not to be quite true either. There are many things that are on the IARC list of type 1 carcinogens that are not regulated in this country. The third assumption is that if you have regulations, that those regulations would be enforced. And as we heard at lunch today, and as we know, this is also not always the case.
There are toxic chemicals. We can see them in food, air, and water pollutants, for example. They're in workplace and community level exposures that influence not only individuals, but entire populations of people because of the milieu in which we all live.
Here's a narrative. Let's see how we do with this one. The life-threatening burdens placed on communities of color near industrial facilities are the result of systemic oppression perpetuated by these industries, which exposes communities to health, economic, and social hazards. Many of the most vulnerable communities are also plagued by legacy policies that permit legacy polluters to continue to contribute to negative health outcomes.
It seems to me that we need to eliminate carcinogens wherever we find them, that we should not get stuck in debates about how much is the highest priority. Healthy lifestyle is absolutely important, but it's not sufficient. Some easy targets of high priorities would have to be things like air pollution, particularly diesel, which is turning out to be a tremendously potent carcinogen. We didn't know that even 20 years ago. Now we know. Industrial sources. In indoor air, a tremendous problem of building materials that are off-gassing.
Some of the top tips related to what I've already been talking about is to look for things that are paraben-free, phthalate-free, and fragrance-free. Look at the product label. Avoid vinyl in your home. Vinyl contains percentage levels, like 25% phthalates in vinyl, so avoiding vinyl when possible. Eat more fresh food instead of packaging. There's a host of reasons to do this anyways, but avoiding packaged food will reduce your exposure to phthalates, bisphenols, as well as perfluorinated chemicals. Keep dust levels low. We know that these chemicals like to hang out in dust. So if you reduce your exposure to dust itself, you'll reduce your exposure to these chemicals. And steer clear of things that are advertised as stain-resistant or antimicrobial. To avoid things like PFAS and to avoid things like triclosan, which is a thyroid disruptor.
Environmental carcinogenesis is really something that's very difficult to study. Epidemiology requires measuring things over long periods of time. It's time-consuming, it's expensive, and asking people to recall exposures over a lifetime is notoriously inaccurate, and so we need much better measures of exposure. We also need better tests for carcinogens, for what is a carcinogen. We cannot continue to test one chemical at a time. We need high throughput methods and the ability to test chemical mixtures. And as you heard from Dr. Goodson this morning, we need better definitions of what is a carcinogen. But we know cancer development is usually multi-step, and that steps can be triggered by different substances.
if we continually ask this risk question, this how much exposure is high enough, I think we're losing sight of the solutions at hand, right? If the question is more, if this is a carcinogen and there's a safer alternative to use, why do we debate the merits of an exposure level? Why not, elevate the opportunities of a solution that's at hand? We just need to move in that direction.
What's missing in this conversation is we can do all the research we want if the community doesn't understand why, and they don't participate, then we have false positives.
There is an extreme need. Just within the last month, we lost 2 women who were 40 and under. And that is consistent in our community. And it becomes to the point where the community doesn't feel as if they can do anything about it or that they should be doing anything about it. And I just wonder what each of you believe you could contribute so that I could take something back home.
There's a professor at George Washington University whose name escapes me that spent 20 years looking at why certain movements actually matter and make a difference. She looked at the NRA, she looked at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and of course the tobacco industry. Gleaning and just giving you the Cliff Note version, what's universal among all of them is that you have to have a grassroots movement.
One of the things county council can do is to hold public hearings where all stakeholders are present. I think that's really important to do. I think everyone needs to be at the table. The scientists need to be at the table, but the community members need to be at the table also. And I also think county council should work with the health department and give them the support needed to aggressively enforce the laws and regulations that are currently on the books and stand up to the toxic polluters.
We know in this region where the polluting sources are. They're coming from wells, they're coming from refineries, they're coming from these cracker plants. If we're able to teach citizens to read their local ordinances and see that there's no language protecting schools, residential zones, childcare centers, playgrounds from those plants being built within them, there's no language in there, then let's start at the local municipality level and get those places to put in language that says, if you're going to bring this industry here, it needs to be this many miles away from the school. It needs to be this many miles away from where people live.
There are elected officials who would do the right thing if they had better information and a supportive public to back them. We need to engage that and own that and make sure that that's in the hands that people can understand. So creating a narrative that says that we can protect the environment, have a strong economy, and a high quality of life. So right now, we don't believe that we can do that because that's not the narrative.
Einstein said you can't solve a problem with the same energy that created it. How do we resonate at a different frequency? And so what I heard today was people testing their margins on how they see the world. But I think to Jamil's point, how can we push beyond that? What's the framework that we use to do that?